Missouri fans, there is no reason to worry about Williams Nwaneri. This and other bye-week narratives coming up right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And speaking of hoops, for the first time in a long time, I think it's official. The Missouri basketball uniforms are better than the football uniforms. I'll explain later in the program. I want to start off by telling you today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And since this is a bye week, I do want to take a shot at a bye week topic that I've seen popping up on several different places where Missouri fans like to peruse different opinions. And by the way, I've also seen this prop up occasionally lately when I'm saying things like, hey, I think Missouri's actually closer than maybe some people think. And then I get commenters who say, I'm from the show me stage, show me. Well, great, fantastic. Well, if you don't like sports talk, you've come to the wrong show. But if you do like Missouri basketball and football talk, you're certainly in the right place. So thanks for being here. But on Williams Nwaneri, of course, with the amount of hype that he's gotten, and no doubt that my program has contributed to that particular hype when I have Brian Smith, the scout master, calling him a generational prospect on the program. So at this point, some Missouri fans are going, wait a second, John, even you told me that Nwaneri would probably be playing in passing situations. At the very least, they'd let him go on 3rd and 15 to try to get to the quarterback, right? Well, that just simply hasn't happened yet. Nwaneri's gotten some action in garbage time in the first couple ball games, but no snaps against Boston College or Vanderbilt. And the reality is very similar to Kewan Lacey, Kewan Lacey, I should say, the Missouri running back who is a true freshman as well. I think both of these guys have a tremendous future at Missouri. You just got to be a little bit patient. And also similar to Kewan Lacey, well, there are a ton of guys ahead of both of them on the depth chart who have played a lot of college football so far, who have a ton of experience. And obviously, Nate Noel ran the ball very well against Vanderbilt last week. Marcus Carroll has been effective as well. Jamal Roberts has obviously carved himself out a role as sort of your pass protection specialist at the very least. So right there, the first two guys I mentioned are 4-year players, now in their 5th year of college football. It's not really realistic to expect a true freshman to vault the depth chart or even challenge those guys for a lot of snaps in important high-leverage scenarios, which is what Missouri's been involved in the previous 2 weeks. And I promise you, by the way, for all the people who seem to be like, oh, I'm hearing rumors that Nwaneri isn't happy. I'm sorry, who are you hearing this from? What is this based upon? I get really irritated at people who just throw this kind of stuff out there on the internet, start a topic on a message board, and just basically throw gasoline onto a fire. Because I promise you, if you have a good enough memory and you peruse the message boards as well, you'll remember that I'm right. I promise you, if you go back to 2022, and heck, the internet lives forever. Go find the receipts for me. But I promise if you go back to 2022, you'll find people who knew that Luther Burden was unhappy and that, oh, he's going to transfer and all this kind of stuff. Well, what happened? Luther Burden ends up staying at Missouri. He's going to play 3 years here at the very least. We all assume this will be his last year here, but regardless, we would have all taken the production we got out of Luther Burden the next 2 years after how his freshman year started. And on Burden, think back to 2022, the types of receivers that Missouri had just depth-wise. You're talking about guys like Kiki Chisholm and Barrett Bannister, Dominic Lovett, another young player in his own right. that just isn't the same as the type of depth that Missouri has at the defensive line and defensive end positions right now. Same thing at running back, just a whole bunch of experienced guys that Missouri, picked out of the portal in a lot of cases, handpicked out of the transfer portal. Guys who got significant money to come here, most of them. So yes, they are probably going to get the Lions' share, if not all of the snaps, ahead of those true freshmen, no matter how bright I think their future is. So we have to keep in mind a couple things. Once again, Missouri is in a much different position in terms of the talent and depth that they have on this roster from just a couple seasons ago. Again, especially you compare the wide receiver position in 22 to the defensive end and tackle position in 2024. I just don't think that's much of a comparison. And by the way, I just see this this psychological human phenomenon all the time of people who just want to think that they're in the know. And especially if you do a podcast like I do, well, people want to tell you that they're in the know. So I'm very careful of all these type of things. For example, a couple years ago when Kansas was doing very well, I knew a guy who's a prominent person in Columbia, not just some yahoo, but somebody who was telling me that he, again, knew it was a done deal that Lance Leopold, the Kansas football coach, was going to be going to Michigan State. Well, it's been a couple years, and that has not come to fruition. So again, for everybody who thinks they know everything and know the future, and maybe they know the assistant equipment manager's first cousin or something like that, and they have some type of in there, I'm not saying maybe you have some information, but here's the thing. It's possible Luther Burden was unhappy a little bit in 2022. But you know what makes you happier? Catching the football, winning some games, I don't know, an extra potato chip deal. My point is things change each and every day. Sometimes I'm irritated with doing this podcast, to be honest with you. Today, I feel energetic, bright-eyed, and bushy-tailed, like I was shot out of a cannon. And I'm frankly thrilled to be here and thrilled that all of you are here with me. That isn't always the case every single day of my life, guys. I know I do a good job of pretending otherwise, but that's just the reality of the human experience, I think. So even if Williams Nwaneri had a bad day, and maybe he expressed some frustration, maybe that was all true. Well, it could be true that the next day that he was like, what the heck? Let's go play some football and go run into the sled a few times. Again, all part of the human experience. I'm just saying, if you think Williams Nwaneri, again, this is the other thing to keep in mind here. Just because we're 4 games into his career, so we've written it already. He's a bust. I mean, give me a break. Aldon Smith, one of the great players. We won't talk about the off the field right now, but one of the great true talents and players in recent Missouri history of the last 20 years or so. We'll call recent history. He's right up there. He's in the top 5 for sure. And he didn't play at all as a true freshman. So it all worked out for Aldon Smith the next year in terms of as a redshirt freshman for Missouri was a big-time difference maker. Can Williams Nwaneri take that path and be a huge difference maker in 2025? Yeah, he can. Absolutely. And so can Kewan Lacey, by the way, too. And what's old is new again for the Missouri basketball program. As just about an hour or so ago, as I record the program here on Friday, the 27th, well, the Tigers are officially going with their throwback uniforms from the past couple seasons full time. And I got to tell you, for somebody my age, these are the perfect kind of member berries. I totally wholeheartedly approve this move, and I really think that these basketball uniforms are even better than the football uniforms now for the first time in many years. So let's talk about that coming up in the program here in just a little bit. First, though, let's talk about Robinhood Gold, because with Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, Receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 per month. The new gold standard is right here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply for product-specific disclosures. Visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Well, if you're like me and you love the Missouri basketball uniforms that were worn from, I believe, let's just say, ballpark around the 70s through the mid-90s or so, the Block M uniforms, well, Missouri's brought them back the last couple years on occasion in a gold variety and in a white variety as well. Well, they're going full-time with those two and a black variety of those uniforms as well. And again, so as a child of the 90s, oh, I love this so much. Makes me think of Doug Smith and Anthony Peeler, Melvin Booker, all of those great days. And, of course, goes even back before that to John Sunvold and Steve Stepanovich and many, many others, Derek Chivas, of course. So, actually, you know what? Let's just bring up the video real quick. This is a video medium as well for those of you on YouTube. I don't think Missouri's going to be angry if I share this video, right? In fact, well, they took my voice for one of their many movies last season without my permission. So you know what? I'll consider it even. Let's check out these uniforms. Ah, yes, the paw emblem on the shorts, a great touch. The only real difference here is that, of course, as we've seen the last couple years, as we've seen again, the Tigers have worn these uniforms before. They're just going full-time now, but the black version, great to see as well. Ah, so many member berries. Javon Crudup, Lamont Frazier, the aforementioned Doug Smith, the Block M all season long. That is a beautiful sight, ladies and gentlemen. It really is. This pleases me, even though I know some people get tired of the uniform talk. Well, as a guy who has a segment called Project Run Play, obviously I do not. And to be honest, this is the type of thing that I wish the Missouri football program would do a little bit more. Just get a uniform that looks like you're Missouri. To be honest, that's what I love about these basketball uniforms, is this absolutely looks like a Missouri basketball team. Sometimes, like last week against Vanderbilt, I'm not sure who we were trying to look like, but white helmets with white pants and a gold jersey, that's just not Missouri to me. So right now, Dennis Gates in basketball, well, they're behind Eli Drinkwitz and company in a lot of ways, but they're ahead in the uniform game right at the moment. And since we're talking basketball, it was an encouraging edition of Gabe DeArmond's The Chamber over at PowerMizzou.com this morning. And I'm not going to obviously steal the information and give you the names or anything like that. I'll just say overall, I was encouraged by the update considering, well, Missouri was 0-19 last season, but also just in general. This is my own personal observation here. I think I'm starting to discern at least a little bit of a pattern in how Dennis Gates does his recruiting, his sort of one element of his recruiting strategy anyway. Because as I was looking at the guys Dennis Gates brought in his 5-man freshman recruiting class that's coming in for this basketball season, but also the guys it looks like we might be getting for 2025. Of course, Aaron Rowe is very much a known commodity there. He's been committed to Missouri for a few months now. But it seems like, Aaron Rowe and the 5 guys we've got right now, especially on the perimeter, I think one thing they all have in common is they all have a lot of upside and generally a lot of length and athleticism too. So what I think the Dennis Gates and company are doing here is they're saying, hey, with these high school recruits, these are guys that are going to take probably a little bit of time to get on the court anyway for the most part. Let's just go for the upside, because guys who are long and athletic that can also shoot, well, those guys are all Americans. How do you find those guys? Well, you got to develop them for the most part if you're a team like Missouri, Or if you're going to recruit at a really, really high level, as Dennis Gates has done occasionally here, you can do it there as well. But traditionally, a Missouri type of program is going to have to develop those type of players. So how do you find them? I think Dennis Gates' strategy is, hey, I've been able to fix guys' jump shots before. Look how Kobe Brown performed. Look how Sean East performed. So here's the thing. If you're a high school player, if you're Honor Boateng, if you're Marcus Allen, and it looks like you've got all the requisite size and athleticism to be a great player in the SEC, but maybe your shot just needs to come along a little bit, fine. I think Dennis Gates thinks he can coach up that part. Then on the other side of the coin, of course, is the transfer portal. And this is where it seems like Dennis Gates says, hey, this is where I'm going to get my guaranteed shooting. I'm not going to really hope that these guys are going to make shots. That's when you bring in guys like Demoy Hodge and DeAndre Golston, and now previously last year, Caleb Grill. Also now Jacob Cruz, thought to be the best shooter on the team. Also, Grill didn't get off to the greatest shooting start before his injury last year, but by all accounts, still one of the best shooters on the team, according to everybody out there. So I just really can't think of a guy I'd consider an absolutely pure shooter that has been successfully recruited by Dennis Gates out of high school yet. And I emphasize successfully because he's thrown some offers out to guys that you would just consider shooters out of high school for sure, but he's never actually sealed the deal. So maybe I'm overanalyzing this a little bit. It certainly is only 2 recruiting classes, and it's definitely not a rule I'm sure that Dennis Gates has written in stone like that or anything like, oh, okay, go for the upside from high school, get more of the ball handler shooter types on the perimeter in the transfer portal, get some more veteran experience there too. But it does seem like a pretty good rule of thumb, if not one that's written in stone. And now back to the gridiron, of course, and back to my point from earlier in the week about how I think Missouri is a lot closer than some people think. Well, I think Luther Burden is actually a good example of this, because if you simply look at his total yardage right now, Burden with 19 catches for 257 yards, certainly compared to last season's start where Burden basically had 5 or 6 games, I believe. There, I can just check that really quick. How many was it to start the year with at least 100 yards, at least 96 yards for Burden in the first 6 ball games last season. So not nearly as fast of a start in terms of those yards go, but does that mean Luther Burden hasn't played well? No, I think it's just more of a function of the Missouri offense having some off moments here, some penalties, all that good stuff. But according to Dan Keegan over at Rock M Nation, I thought he had some great stats here on Burden. Of those 19 catches so far, 15 of his 19 catches have gone for a first down or a touchdown. That's pretty productive. He also has forced 12 missed tackles in these 4 games and is 2 for 2 on contested catches. So it's hard to say Burden could have done a whole lot more so far in this young season. So I really think that Missouri is just on the cusp of clicking how we want to see this offense click. And as I pointed out a few weeks ago, Matt Zollers, the big-time ballyhooed Missouri quarterback recruit in the 25 class from the state of Pennsylvania, fortunately suffered a pretty gruesome injury just a couple weeks ago. And, well, what's his status? That's the question. Matt Zollers did put out a graphic with him in a Mizzou football uniform on his social media saying the comeback. He's been positive about the whole thing. Gabe DeArmond had an update. I'll share that with you coming up here in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about a PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with more than 5 million active users. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the earnings roll in. You can now even win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct Picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get on the action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Here's just an example of the type of action I'm talking about. Josh Allen for fewer than 240 passing yards, and CeeDee Lamb for more than 96 receiving yards. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONCollege on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Well, on the Joe Theismann scale of horrific-looking leg injuries, Matt Zollers' one was pretty high up there. But of course, there's a really big range of outcomes for those types of leg injuries. You know, you never want your foot to be pointing in the wrong direction. I think we can all agree with that. But there is a big difference between, for example, Dak Prescott. I mentioned that he's the highest paid quarterback in the NFL right now. Well, it was just, 2-3 years ago or something when his foot was pointing the wrong way after an awkward slide when his foot got caught in the ground, sort of similarly to Zollers, it sounds like. And obviously Dak Prescott, not really affected by that, it doesn't seem at this point. Now, obviously, Alex Smith, for example, former Kansas City Chief, 49er, currently with the Washington football team, was it called? Sure, we'll go with that. But he played for Washington and obviously had a much worse outcome. So, thank you to Gabe DeArmond, by the way, who reached out to Zollers. I don't think Gabe will mind if I share this little quote here. It's a positive update, and frankly, I should have done this myself. I should have gotten on to DMs and reached out to Matt myself. I forget that people actually reply to me. It's shocking. But anyway, here's what Gabe said about Zollers. Reached out to him. His reply was, quote, "It's been good on his injury and recovery." He said, "It's been going good, and I'm in a good mental state and just ready to get straight to rehab as soon as I can. The injury won't affect me at all for the next offseason and season. I ended up breaking my fibula. I was very pleased with how everything went. Surgery went as planned." Now, I will say this could just be a young man who's very a positive, Pollyannish type of guy. But again, I think I can trust more or less what he's saying there. It seems like a pretty good outcome. I will say that. Lord knows I don't want to ever know what breaking my fibula feels like. But that's one of those things that, hey, if it's a relatively clean break, you don't mess with any nerves, that kind of deal. As bad as it felt, as bad as it can be in the moment, long term, again, like Dak Prescott, the kind of thing, Derek Carr had a lower leg break like that. You know, there are various NBA players who've had that type of injury. Paul George, Julius Randle. Remember Gordon Hayward had a weird, ankle dislocation. The point is, these guys all came back. They were able to play years of basketball at the highest level, years of football at the highest level. So hopefully that is the case with Matt Zollers. And based on this update here from Gabe DeArmond, that's about as positive as it could be at this point. And finally, viewer Ed Meyer made me realize with his comment that I do need to clarify something. Ed says, "I disagree so much with Kansas State being worse than KU and even Tennessee or Oklahoma." Well, again, Ed, let me be clear, as I thought I was being clear on the show. I definitely hate Kansas the most of all the programs in the land. That will never, ever, ever change. I was simply talking about the online presence of their fans and the amount of vitriol that I personally get from said fan bases. To me, so far, and about 5 years of doing this, Kansas State fans, I think, take the cake. Tennessee and Oklahoma fans, they've definitely had their run. And KU fans, well, they've had their moments, I guess, in basketball of trolling. But to be fair, there hasn't been any football matchups, and it's just not quite the same. I'm simply talking about the Kansas State fans. They're just kind of rough online. I'm not going to lie. Hey, I sat next to a Kansas State fan at a Royals game this past season. He was a delight. I enjoyed my time with him. But I'm just talking about specifically YouTube commenters, Twitter, and all that good stuff. And by the way, to be fair to you, Ed, Oklahoma has its chance to make up ground on the Wildcats in a few weeks. That lead up to the Sooners game and the post game, well, that'll be the true barometer of just how obnoxious the Sooner fans are. So thanks for the comment. And you know what? If you'd like to comment, feel free to do so. And if you really have a thought out, something very thought out that you think is worthy of being on the show, probably the best place to hit me up is at email or on Twitter at Locked On Mizzou, or again, email lockedonmizzou@gmail.com. Don't always get to all the YouTube comments. I try to. Frankly, it's too many sometimes. I just can't handle it. But anyway, regardless, thanks as always for listening. Until next time, I am John Miller, and this has been Locked on Mizzou.